Hello and welcome to the Down Under Visa Philippines to Australia podcast series. I'm your host, Jeff Harvie, Registered Migration Agent with Down Under Visa, the premier Australian migration agents in Manila, Philippines, specialising in visas for Australian Filipina couples. We hope you enjoy this podcast and hope it proves useful to you. Please feel free to share this with your partner and with any of your interested friends. Let's get started. Hello everyone. Just before we start, we just have a little visitor here who would like to say hello.
Hello everybody, my name is Maggie.
Your name is what?
Maggie.
Right. And how old are you, Maggie?
5 years old.
Okay, that was Maggie saying hello. Bye, Maggie.
Bye.
Okay, let's get started. Now, today's podcast, it comes from the blog article entitled Tourist Visa Scams for Australians. Now, it's been a while since I wrote an article about tourist visa scams and scammers, but sadly, scamming and scammers do still exist, and there is many an overly trusting Australian who simply wants to be loved and wants a tourist visa from Philippines to Australia for his Filipina girlfriend, or the girl he believes to be his girlfriend. And the fact is that unless you are Jamie Packer, as an Aussie you simply don't see yourself as a target. Most Aussies are just like every other Aussie. You might earn a little bit more than your neighbour, but not that much more that you have to worry about anybody in Australia preying on you. Even doctors and lawyers in Australia take their own garbage out and mow their own lawns. I mean, it's, the Prime Minister has somebody, driving them around and doing these things for them, but average person doesn't. Average, local politician, whatever, they don't. They're still fairly ordinary. So this is it, you don't see yourself as a target. But once you have dealings with the Philippines, well, all that changes. Congratulations. You are now a rich man. The Philippines Travel Agent Scam. Now, this one comes out of the Philippines, and sometimes it comes from travel agents in China with Filipino visa applicants. Now, what it needs is somebody with a high need and low morality, and a pretty face and other bits, and somebody with high gullibility and loneliness. And I'm not picking on anybody here. Don't get me wrong, I'm not laughing at anyone or judging. My first trip to the Philippines in the 90s was a result of being lured here by a pretty face and some seriously suggestive flirting from a 23-year-old in Biliran lady. Interesting times when I look back. My goodness, I would have benefited enormously if I had have found some helpful advice, but honestly there wasn't much back then. All there seemed to be were websites where people said nonsense about, which made it sound like every single Filipino was perfect in every possible way and was extremely congenial and family oriented, and it was just going to be the easiest thing in the world that anyway, again, loneliness makes you do silly things, and I know all about that, been there, done that. Now, common to this scam is the prospective Australian sponsor who hasn't met the Filipina girl in person yet. Now, anyone from Australia who has had an immigration assessment for a tourist visa applicant from the Philippines with Down Under Visa's free visa assessment form. If you haven't seen that, go to our website, www.downundervisa.com.au, and you'll see a free assessment form there. Just click on it, takes you 5 minutes. But anybody who has done one knows that we will, this is somebody who hasn't met the girl in person, we will strongly talk you out of applying for tourist visas when you haven't met in person before. If you've made a commitment to a relationship by travelling overseas to meet the girl in her own country and her usual surrounds, and most likely met her family too, then a trip to Australia is most likely to enhance your already existing relationship and probably take the relationship to the next step. Now, she is less likely to be at risk of breaching visa conditions and overstaying, and the embassy staff know that. Whereas a brief relationship between a flirtatious Filipino girl and an Australian man she's never met before, well, look, it's far more of a risk. Now, they know this, and therefore far less likely to actually grant a visa. I won't say it's absolutely impossible, but it's extremely rare. We've had cases where a couple have been corresponding literally for years, but they haven't met in person and they end up getting refused. It's just a sign they look at because obviously, their job is to make sure that nobody is cheating the system, and their job is to guard the borders from people like that. So that's the point. If the visa applicant was from Japan or somewhere with a fairly affluent population, considerably less risk. But tourist visa applicants from the Philippines, now whether applying in Manila or somewhere in China, they have practically no hope of ever getting a tourist visa under these circumstances, and sorry to say, rightly so. And the second common scam factor is the add-ons. Add-on sales, just like the McDonald's staff saying, "Certainly, sir, and would you like fries with that?" Every successful scammer wants to milk every drop they can get. So you get additional requirements added onto the visa application. Now we come across these things when somebody, generally they have either used our contact form or they filled out a visa assessment form, and they'll tell me these things, and they seem to be quite oblivious to the fact that they just plain don't sound right. Now, examples include selling a plane ticket. Now, we always say to people, don't book flights until the visa is granted. Now, the Australian Embassy in Manila, and I'm sure Australian embassies everywhere else in the world, say the same thing. Don't book the ticket before you have the visa. Because, from a simple fact, the visa may not get granted, and then you find yourself stuck with a ticket, or you might think, 3 weeks, and then it takes 3.5 weeks. The visa gets granted, but the plane's already taken off, and there you are stuck with a ticket. But the usual thing that's quite common as part of a scam is, I'll say, oh yes, well they wanted me to. They said the Australian government wants me to buy a ticket, so they send money off to the girl to supposedly to buy a ticket. And claiming that visa applicant needs expensive insurance. Now, I've heard stories of compulsory travel insurance over $1,000. Travel insurance and health insurance make good sense, but won't cost $1,000. Again, they've said, the Australian Embassy insists on it. They won't give a visa to her unless, she can show that she's got this horribly expensive travel insurance, which means, put two and two together. Obviously, it's a scam. And the old favourite, show money. Now, this is the old chestnut story about how the visa applicant needs to show that they are independently wealthy, able to support themselves, and therefore no risk of overstaying. Now, the scam is that you need to loan her anything from $2,000 to $5,000 to deposit into a bank account in her name, which will supposedly fool, came down on the last shower, born yesterday, case officer in the embassy, into thinking that she somehow earned this money working in Pure Gold supermarket and earning 7,000 pesos a month, which is not even $200, and somehow she will have this nice savings account with the equivalent of $5,000 Australian sitting in that one. Now, you just think about that one without thinking about a pretty girl, and what conclusion do you draw? Kind of obvious. scams to get money. I mean, I'll tell you quite simply, if you are still scratching your head at this particular point, no, the Australian government don't want expensive travel insurance, they don't want show money, they don't want you to show plane tickets. It's got nothing to do with it. So, how can an Australian avoid visa scams from the Philippines? Look, the common denominator in any visa scam is money. Now, if the scammer had money and the Australian man had nothing, no scam would exist. Now, if either of these two scenarios existed, then the scam would never happen. No one in the Philippines believes that any Australian is short of money, so you are stuck as the rich man, even if you're, living in a caravan somewhere and you're on a pension or something. They're still going to believe that you are a rich man. This is scammers I'm talking about here, and they're going to believe that you are a source of cash. So, however, there were two types of rich man. You have the generous rich man to whom nothing is too much, and sorry to say, some of you gentlemen are a little silly in that you will make a strong effort to try and dazzle and impress the girl by flashing your money around, by booking very, very expensive hotels, by sending absurdly expensive bunches of flowers around the world and various things like that, and sending massive allowances, etc., etc. You basically, you may as well paint a target on yourselves. And the other one is the Koripot rich man. Now, Koripot, that's a Tagalog word that you should learn, and you should be proudly Koripot. What it means is stingy and tight with money. Well, that's the negative way of looking at it. You can also say it means that you are sensible and practical and you're not stupid about it. So those are your two types of rich man. So which of the two is more likely to get scammed? Kind of obvious, isn't it? Now, the other factor is time. Now, if you start chattering away with a girl and you start sending allowances to her within weeks, don't expect much sympathy when you get scammed. If your intention is to build a genuine relationship and 6 months into it you haven't sent her a penny and you're getting on great, well, the chances are all but the most determined scammer will have moved on to greener pastures. So back in the 90s, when I started writing letters to girls in the Philippines, it was a little less sophisticated. They didn't have, videos, and, nobody was using the internet back then. It was less sophisticated days, but you'd write your letter, then you get the letter back, and it would say that she'd say something about herself and her circumstances, and then the next paragraph she would announce that she had already fallen in love with you. I'd had those. Yes, I find myself already in love with you. And third paragraph was request for money. Sometimes it was, I can remember one. If she was in love with me, and then, I'm wanting to start up a business, but I have no capital. And as my coming husband, I think she called me, it would be only right that I should provide this capital for her to start up this business. And in which case, it's kind of obvious. And I was a bit silly back then, but I wasn't quite that silly. Again, the bottom line is if you take money out of the equation, and where can the issue be? And I want you to think carefully now that this girl. I hear men, telling me, the sad stories about how, how much he's struggling and can't pay this and can't pay that. And that may well be absolutely true, but the fact is, she and her family survived up until they met you, and the chances are they will keep surviving if you don't send any money. So, think about it. The chances of you suddenly dropping into the inn at exactly the point where you can, save a little brother from, impending doom, and, you can finally get that operation for grandma, and you can help her, to pay her school fees and to stop her getting evicted at exactly the point that you just turned up. The chances, it's fairly unlikely. Again, if you take money out of the equation, then you're not going to have an issue. So take your time, keep your money out of it. Remember this should be the biggest decision you've ever made in your life. It's said that men can spend more time choosing a car than they can spend deciding on a girl that they're going to marry, and that's a little bit sad. So don't rush it. Take your time. If there's something real there, it'll still be there in 6 months' time. And try to keep your brain active and alert. Good luck to you. Thanks very much. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Down Under Visa Philippines to Australia podcast series. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed, and we hope you found this useful. Australian visas from the Philippines are not easy, and the outcome matters, as you well know. Please feel free to contact us anytime if you need some further help. And we look forward to talking to you again next time. Bye-bye.